Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Logic. Evaluating inferences using the traditional square of opposition is the topic of this video. 4 formal fallacies can arise, namely illicit contrary, illicit subcontrary, illicit subalternation, and the existential fallacy. So again, illicit contrary. Now this fallacy occurs when a conclusion is drawn improperly from the contrary relation. Example: this inference commits the illicit contrary fallacy. Notice the premise is an A proposition, which is given as false, and the conclusion is an E proposition, so the relation is the contrary relation. However, the contrary relation says at least one A or E proposition must be false, and since A is already given as false, the E is undetermined. Next, the illicit subcontrary. This fallacy is committed when a conclusion is improperly drawn from the subcontrary relation. Here's an example. Now notice the premise is an I proposition, which is given as true, and the conclusion is an O proposition, which is stated as true. The relation is subcontrary. But subcontrary says at least one must be true, and since I is given as true, the O proposition has undetermined truth value. All this was covered in the last video in this playlist. Now next is the illicit subalternation. This fallacy occurs when a conclusion is improperly drawn from the subalternation relation. For example, notice the premise in this inference is an A proposition, which is given as false. The conclusion is an I proposition. Now the relation is subalternation, and the conclusion is stated as false because A is false, but according to subalternation, falsity does not flow downward. And finally, the existential fallacy. Now this fallacy occurs when the relations are applied to things that do not exist. For example, the premise and conclusion here are statements about magical leprechauns, and since magical leprechauns do not exist, the existential fallacy is committed, even though the subalternation relation was applied properly. Now, let's test an immediate inference for validity. First, we note that the premise is an O proposition. The premise is claimed to be true, so we mark the O proposition as true. Next, we note that the conclusion is an I proposition, so we check the square to see if the I is to prove true. But when we check the square by subcontrary, the I proposition has undetermined truth value, so the inference is invalid. The illicit subcontrary fallacy is committed. Now, time to work some practice problems on your own. This premise is an A proposition, and the conclusion is an I proposition. So if A is true, what is I? Now press pause if you need to, because the answer will appear in 3, 2, 1. Ding! True. If A is true, then I must be true, because of subalternation. Now how is this inference to be evaluated? Press pause if you need to. The answer will appear in 3, 2, 1. Ding! Valid. The conclusion is drawn properly from subalternation. Next practice problem. How should this inference be evaluated? Press pause if you need to. The answer will appear in 3, 2, 1. Ding! Invalid. Illicit. Contrary. The conclusion is improperly drawn from the contrary relation. And next practice problem. How is this inference to be evaluated? Press pause if you need to. The answer will appear in 3, 2, 1. Ding! Invalid. The existential fallacy is committed. Unicorns do not exist. Very good job on those practice problems. Now note this. The traditional square of opposition can also be used with conversion, obversion, and contraposition. You're one step closer to advancing to the next level. See my other videos on logic comment, like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day.